Welcome to the fifth of 7 videos exploring Chapter 8 in risk decisions. And in this particular video, we're going to explore one of the supplemental readings associated with the course and look at the CIS 20 security controls. All right, so we're going to start off with some core definitions from the paper. Most of these should make a lot of sense based on what you've already done within the course. I'll highlight the differential at the bottom between inherent and residual risk. Notice that inherent risk is going to be that combination of impact and likelihood without considering existing controls. And residual risk is what risk remains after those controls have actually been implemented. And this is a great paper, has a sense of humor associated with it. And for those security professionals out there, you'll look at their sense of humor and go, that's spot on in terms of what the truth is on the ground. All right, so as we start off with, we could look at where do decisions get made, and what are the best levels? And as you can see, those first 3 levels, levels 3, 4, and 5, are actually pretty horrible. Okay, so if you start at the bottom, the absolute worst, you've got ineffective methods, it increases error, and it results in incredibly poor decision making, and it's no improvement over just making stuff up. And unfortunately, we do have controls that are out there that are like this. Y'all have heard my rant against 8-character passwords that expire every 90 days. 8-character passwords take about 2 hours to break on a 2015 PC, and so that's just not an effective control, and there's this false sense of security when there's no security, candidly at all, if they get a hold of your password file. All right, better than that is you've got some scoring mechanisms used, but management doesn't actually use those, and so again, you've got, a negative consequence and a waste of time and money. Baseline is we're using intuition to make decisions. There's no real formal risk management being attempted. Level 2 is first level where we see quantitative methods starting to be used. And then level 1, we're running simulations, we're doing empirical measurements, and we're identifying all the possible risks. And this is why risk management and security remain a field where there are lots of opportunity for improvement. If you can think beyond the 6th grade math level, you can do a great job within this field. Here's another model associated with this. It's called the hamster wheel of pain. You start off with ignorance that everything's great. Thus, I have no attacks that I know about, therefore I must be completely secure. You then have some indications that you're hosed. There's some verification externally that you're hosed. Sheer panic results. You fix that specific problem and then go back to ignorance is bliss. And again, this sounds very humorous, but lots of security operations actually run this way. And lots of vendor solutions, unfortunately, are focused on this kind of urgency-based need rather than a risk management approach or an importance-based approach to doing things. So we started off, this was actually up in the top right of the first slide I showed, this idea of, well, why don't we go out and identify and assess what's really going on within our environment, within our industry, and document that. Apply our experience and intuition from there, do a risk assessment, do an impact likelihood and control effectiveness like we often do. As you can see in the right frame, I've identified some websites you can potentially look like. There's a methodology from MITRE on risk impact assessment and prioritization for impact, and then for likelihood, I've focused on the open threat taxonomy and provided a address to the PDF associated with that, but of course you can go and look for other sources, and then looked at what technical controls do we want to put in place. And this particular article talks about the CIS 20 critical controls. And from there you've got to prioritize, well, what are the highest risks within my environment, and how am I going to tackle those risks? This is just a shot from the open threat taxonomy. And you can see they've got different types of threats: physical, resource, personnel, and technical threats that are included in there. Well worth the read, and then the consideration of to what degree do these apply to my environment? And the screenshot over on the left is just a small subset of all of the things that are actually within that open threat taxonomy. From there, you go through our normal mechanism of applying likelihood and impact. And as you can see, we've got 5 potential threats. They're all up there in the extreme category. What the second chart does, though, is it changes your axes. Look, your left axis now becomes impact versus likelihood. What was the rating out of that first chart? And then comparing that against the security controls and what residual risk results after the application of those security controls. And as you can see, we spread things out. Now number 2 and 5 are the ones we really should be focusing on, perhaps number 3 as well. All right, when we're looking at the 20 security controls, first of all, there they are. They're over there on the right side of the screen, and they have their 5 underlying tenets that govern these. The first of which is that offense informs defense. That means you should be looking at the environment, see what's really taking place, and then using controls to combat that. And that if you have a control in place and it's no longer applicable, there's no longer a threat that those controls are help mitigating, then eventually you're going to remove that control from your environment. The second is that the list is in priority order. You want to start on those things at the top, then move to the bottom. That means if you don't have an inventory of authorized and unauthorized devices and software, it doesn't make a lot of sense to start doing penetration testing. You need to do the basics first and then move forward. As you're building in these 20 controls, you want to put metrics in against them that let you decide how well am I doing against these particular controls. There's always ongoing diagnostics and mitigation in terms of what controls are going to be appropriate, and should we make any fine-tuning of those controls to strengthen against a particular threat. And then to the extent possible, you want to automate these as much as possible. All right, very good. So those are the 5 underlying tenets. These are the 20 security controls. And again, you start with doing that very daunting task of inventorying all the devices and software, coming up with secure configurations, baselining and accrediting what we've talked about, that hardware and software, moving into continuous vulnerability assessment and remediation. That may involve patching. It may involve a lot more than patching. Looking at the use of administrative privileges, looking at monitoring and analyzing your audit logs, focusing on those key tools that everybody uses, email, web browsers, looking for malware, going in now and starting to focus on not only your network ports, but your data recovery capability, looking at your network architecture and network devices, data protection and classification, and so on and so forth. And so you start working down this list of these 20 controls and making sure that you're addressing each of these components. The MITRE article talks a great deal about creating risk statements, and one of the things that was very useful from that is the idea of using an if-then statement to create your risk. If this occurs, then this will be the impact of that. Okay? And then you can have some analysis associated with that get to the key characteristics associated with risk statements. And I know we covered risk statements earlier in the book, but this is a really nice approach from a different source for building those risk statements. As we look at this next slide, and this next slide is actually the last slide, you look at 2 different methodologies for doing this. Most of the articles that you find out there talk about, well, we'll do risk identification, impact estimate, likelihood estimate, control effectiveness evaluation, and then that enables prioritization. What the article suggests is perhaps doing this in reverse order, starting with that control effectiveness assessment, which will inform what risk statements are out there. From there, you can determine a more accurate impact and likelihood, and from there do better prioritization. So again, different way of thinking about it. Doesn't mean one's right or wrong, but it is a different way of doing it. You have to look at your environment and see which of the 2 is going to be more beneficial. Do you start with that risk identification, or do you start with a control effectiveness assessment? All right, well, very good. Look at that. I think we just finished number 5 out of 7 videos covering Chapter 8 of Wheeler's most excellent book on security risk management. And we're into the additional readings right now. So we just finished talking about CIS controls. What we're going to do now is broaden this to a strategic level and talk about the board engagement as we're looking at different types of risk decisions. All right, so keep on studying, keep on learning. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.